Determine the equation of the inverse of y equals negative x squared plus 4. So here in A, this is where we're going to use that technique where we switch x and y, and then solve for y. So what would that look like to begin with? We would get x equal negative y squared plus 4. We would move the 4 over, and I'll do that first, because negatives sometimes cause some grief. Before I can square root both sides, I have to get rid of that negative sign. You could divide by negative, or you could multiply by negative. Okay? If you divide by negative, you might write it as x minus 4 all divided by negative 1. Are you okay if I multiply by negative? I'm going to get negative x plus 4. And that would equal y squared. So now we square root both sides. And then make the same mistake that all of you make many times. I forgot the plus or minus. Okay? This might be the 9:45 reminder. When you square root both sides, remember plus or minus. And so now we have found the equation of the inverse. Oh, this is a fascinating equation. We'll talk about it in a bit, but we'll answer the questions first. Is the inverse a function? We don't have a graph, but is that inverse a function? No. Why not? It just feels like it's a no. Okay?
Because whatever the inverse of the
Is the
it's always the original is always a
inverse
function.
be a function if the first one isn't?
If the first one isn't, sometimes the inverse could be a function, yes. The inverse is sometimes a function. I can think of lots of, like the graph of that line, when we drew the reflection, we got another line, and both lines were functions. Good point. This is a square root graph, but the problem is that we have this plus or minus. So one of the things that we noted with the inverse is not a function because it doesn't pass the vertical line test, which was if we have a graph, but we don't have a graph. You can't just, this does not count. You can't go take a vertical line and go across your equation. That only works for, oh, it's not sliding for me. There we go. No, you can't do that to an equation. The vertical line test only works with a graph. But the second part that I wrote in this vertical line test was to explain this means some x values have more than one y value. If I plug in okay. We'll restart our video where we left off, and we can say that when we switched x and y and solved for y, we got negative x plus 4 with plus or minus. Is that what we had?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I was trying to highlight from the other screen that the meaning was some x values have more than one y value. Can you tell me an x value you could plug in here that you could do mental math for? 0. 0 would be a good one, right? Because what's 0 plus 4? 4. What's the square root of 4? 2. So when x equals 0, what does y equal?
2.
Or y could also equal negative 2. And so when a y value has more than 1, it's not a function. Okay? If we wanted to see the graph and its inverse, part B, sketch the graph of y equals negative x squared plus 4. What kind of graph is that? No, this first one. Negative x squared plus 4. So in B, I am going to sketch, it's a parabola. What happens to that parabola? The negative would flip it down, and then the plus 4 would shift it 4 to the up. This is the graph of negative x squared plus 4. Agreed? And so if I wanted to graph the inverse of this, this is not good? Well, what happened?
No, it's good.
It's good? Okay.
I just understood.
I'm confused too.
Wait, when we put 0 in, did that solve our x-intercepts?
If you put in 0 for y, you would find the x-intercepts, yes.
How would we
Just
find?
plotted them.
I plotted them.
I was like, why is it so wide? I was thinking,
I mean, it still does over 1 down 1, over 1 down 3, if you want to use that.
oh, it just looks wide.
Looks wide, might be my scale. Now, anytime you want to graph your inverse, graphically you switch the x and the y values. So what's going to happen to 0, 4? I'll do this one in green. It'll be 4, 0. What's going to happen to 2, 0? Switch the x and the y. 0, 2. Negative 2, 0.
Oh, great.
0, negative 2. And so when we draw the graph, and if you think about this flipping over this line, there is the graph. And we can see from the graph it doesn't pass the vertical line test. In fact, we label the points when x is 0, y is 2, and negative 2, and that's a place where, one of the places it doesn't pass the vertical line test. Yes?
This might be dumb, but I thought it was supposed to be like an exact reflection over the x equals y line.
It is. Okay, let's cheat a little bit here. I'm going to try to, there we go. Whoops. I'm going to put those all together. I'm going to take,
It was dumb.
all right, I'm going to make it horizontal. My graph might be a little bit off, but this should flip, yeah, it is off. This part should flip straight across to that one. But I think because these are wider than these, it might be a little bit off. Does that make sense? But this point goes straight to this one.
I didn't even,
This point goes straight to that one. This point would go straight to that one. To complete.
I didn't realize it was literally half. I thought like the graph, like just one graph is, okay, I got it.
You're good?
I get it.
Okay, I'm going to undo all this confusing flipping.
You know what that makes sense?
There we go. And we're back.
Now I'm confused more.
It's like,
Oh, did you think this
It's not like
was gonna flip over that night?
I thought it was just gonna be like, I can't. I can't. I just get it now. It makes
It's okay.
I don't want to
So.
talk about it.
Something more that's interesting that happens in this graph, okay, is if I look at just the positive part of this, that's a square root graph, right? That's a square root graph that has a horizontal reflection and a horizontal translation. Horizontal reflection would reflect it over the y, right? And then the translation would move it 4 to the, special note. What do we have to do if we actually want to do this? We would have to write it in factored form. It actually moves it 4 to the right. Here's my square root graph, flipped over, moved 4 to the right. Can you see that that matches up with the top part? Oh.
Minus is like just writing 2 square root.
And if you did the minus sign, that graph would give you the bottom part.
So it's like just writing 2 square root graphs.
It's like putting 2 square root graphs together. Putting 2 square root graphs together makes it not a function.
Crazy.
Okay? And what's the opposite of squaring? Square rooting. Do the graphs relate to each other? Yes, they're connected. Oh. Okay.
Math is cool.
Math is cool. Yes. So, questions 5 and 6 for homework, but